Hello, hello. We are picking up where we left off with chapter 3 of Brihat Samhita. So, for being a little late, but I was trying to research a couple of those points. So, I just want to, if anybody has any interesting information from yesterday about Twashta or Tamasakilaka, please put it in the chat. Meanwhile, let's start a review of what we looked at yesterday, with a little bit, having had a little bit more time to digest it. So basically, what he talks about, he opens the chapter on the sun, which is the opening of him actually talking about directly astrological stuff, and the way that he starts talking about the sun is he starts talking about the irregularities that you might observe with it. So that is the basic nature of omenology. That's basically what you do with omens, is you look for irregular things. The river flows the opposite direction. The sun is dark instead of light. Okay? Stuff like that. That's the basis of things that are solid start to shake. Things that are supposed to move start to stand still. Those are your omens. So when the sun doesn't look the way it's supposed to or doesn't do what it's supposed to, that's what he first starts talking about. The first thing of all those ways that the sun could be irregular, the first thing he talks about is its irregular movement. And this is an interesting point because he's talking about equinoxes and solstices. So he says the sun isn't always regular with its solstice. Now, I've seen this passage brought up. I've brought this passage up in the tropical sidereal debate, and I've seen other people bring it up to try to demonstrate the opposite point. So let's clarify this a little bit. Some people, I bring it up because it says, Varahamihira first says, in the old days, the sun got to its solstice, and you should know from yesterday what the solstice is, the most extreme point north or south of the equator. The sun gets to its solstice when it's at such and such nakshatra, the middle of Ashlesha, and the beginning of Dhanishta. Sorry, I also woke up late. But these days, it's not at that spot. It's at a different spot these days. So he makes that statement. So that shows that he knows that the equinoxes and solstices move in relation to the stars, which is actually not groundbreaking because everybody basically knew that at that time. But that he acknowledges it. Then he starts to talk about if the sun, and he stops talking about the reference between the solstice and the equinox. I believe that he just mentioned, between the solstice and the stars. I believe that he mentioned the relationship between solstice and stars first as a way to say, this is one thing about the solstice which is irregular, but this is not the thing that you interpret. Because actually the difference between the solstice and the stars is a regular thing. It moves, the solstice point and a stellar point move at a fixed rate to each other. It's not irregular, it's not an omen. So then he stops mentioning nakshatras or stellar reference points at all. And he says, in relation to the tropical measure of the solstice, sometimes the sun gets there early, sometimes on time, sometimes late. And he says you can measure this in such and such ways with shadows and so forth. That's what he's talking about. It's not a regular drift of the sun from a point. It's irregular. On the year, he says, on a year where the sun actually hits its solstice a little bit before expected, it's not so great. On a year where the sun actually hits it right on time or a little bit later, it's great, right? So this is a year by year thing. It can't be. He's not talking about that the border of Capricorn is not always the solstice. Okay, I hope that's kind of clear, a little bit clearer. Then the next thing that he talks about are irregularities. Remember, the whole chapter he's talking about is irregularities that you might observe with the sun. So first he observes that the sun's motion might be irregular, and then he starts to say the sun's disk might be irregular, and the moon's disk as well. He mentions the moon in passing, but it helps us rule out a different thing. Some people have asked, could this be in sunspots? And actually, as I was researching this morning, some people that actually have written about this think that it's sunspots. But he says that the same spots appear on the moon. So it's not sunspots. Even if sunspots are observable to people of the 6th century, which I'm not sure, maybe they were, but you can't have sunspots on the moon. So we know he's not talking about sunspots. The clue to what he's actually talking about is the fact that he calls them Ketu. Ketu is an astronomical term that does not only refer to the south node of the moon, but refers to any effect that is considered to be like a Rahu, like a product of Rahu. And that's why he says there are 33 Ketus, they're sons of Rahu. Ketu is a product of Rahu. Rahu is the main entity, the north node. The north node causes eclipses, and then there's things which are like eclipses. Unusual occurrences which seem much more difficult to predict. Astronomically, to predict. Like, it's not so difficult to predict when Mercury is going to go retrograde, but it's much more difficult to predict when there's going to be an eclipse. And it's much more difficult to predict when there's going to be a shooting star, when there's going to be a comet. So Ketus, it's astronomically well known that the term Ketu, you can look it up in any Sanskrit to English dictionary. Even you look up Ketus, it'll say comets, meteors, any unusual meteorological occurrence is called a Ketu, because the actual meaning of the word Ketu is something that draws your eye, something like a flag. So what he's talking about here is that sometimes there's just going to be random kinds of weird things that happen in the sky. And he says it's not that much of, from what he said so far, from what I gathered from what he said so far, he says it's not that much of a big deal if it doesn't cross the sun or doesn't cross the moon. But if it crosses the sun and the moon, it's a bigger deal. And he also says if it happens during an eclipse, it's not a big deal, which is interesting. Because I think during an eclipse, that's the main thing. And something weird is already happening to the sun. Okay, so then he says there are, for some reason, 33 different types of weird things that can happen. So they're basically, as far as I can tell, like comets passing in front of the sun, other things like, he's going to say like smoke, weird kinds of smokes, weird kinds of things, just weird things in the sky that come in front of the sun or the moon. Okay? So now let's pick up where we left off yesterday. He says, wow, that's interesting. Let's see, what did we get up to yesterday? Basically, it's a bad thing, right? Because you don't want things which are usually pretty and clean to then become dirty. Basically, a good omen will be if things are irregular in a pleasant way, and a bad omen will be if things are irregular in a scary way or an ugly way, right? So you got the sun or the moon, it's usually this nice shiny disk, and then all of a sudden it gets covered by something, or something comes in front of it. That's kind of scary. So when these tamasika kilikas, when these weird spots of darkness show themselves in the sun's disk, there's going to be problems. And it's said that this is also an interesting point. One other translation of this has that the country that sees it happen is going to be the one that has the misfortune. So in other words, it's a meteorological occurrence probably, not an astrological occurrence, because it's close to the earth and your angle of observation affects it a lot, whether or not you would see it in front of the sun. That's one thing I'm thinking. So the country that sees this object pass in front of the sun or the moon has either bad or good luck. With the moon, it's good. The country that sees it come over the moon is going to have bad luck. Not only will the regular people be affected, even the sages can be affected. They're going to he says they're going to give up. It's also interesting to read the way old authors give their predictions, because you could see what people think are good and bad in those days. So he says the sages will give up their religious duties, so they'll give up doing their rituals and ceremonies, and they'll stop trying to do their tapas, their vows, and they'll just try to leave the country. And they'll suffer while they're trying to leave the country, because there will be lack of food, and they already don't have that much food. He says another sign that he says of something bad is having people get robbed by thieves, having people feel tired all the time and sad. People will start to speak in disdain about the behavior of their own kings and will not attribute their suffering to their previous karma. So this is also kind of a constant situation. Now for us, we must have stuff in front of the sun all the time. We're constantly speaking in disdain about our own leaders, and we're constantly thinking that we don't deserve the problems that are in our life. He says you're going to get droughts even though there's clouds. The rivers will go dry, etc., etc. Okay, so those are the kind of bad things that would happen in those days. Then he's going to say that I think the reason why there's 33 different kinds of these K2s is they make 30 different kinds of shapes, and you can give some specific interpretation based on the shape of the weird thing that comes in front of the sun. If it's in the form of a stick, then the king dies. If it looks like a headless body, then you get disease. That would be interesting. I wonder if China saw a weird headless body in front of the sun. See, I wish there was in those days, they should have illustrated these books. They really should have made that effort to illustrate these books. If an object appears like a body without the head, there will be an outbreak of disease. If the form be that of a crow, so if it looks like a bird, you get attacked by thieves. If it looks like a wedge, you get famine. So it's very simple. It's very simple what he's saying. If it looks like a stick, then it means the guy who holds the stick, that's the king holds the scepter. It's going to affect the scepter. If it looks like a body without a head, then it's going to affect the people's bodies. If it looks like a bird, like a crow, crows symbolize outcast people, thieves and stuff like that, then you're going to get trouble from the miscreants. Social unrest, social misfunction. If it looks like a plow, then there's problems with the farms. This is very simple, the system. If the sun's disk is obscured by obstacles in the form of king's paraphernalia, like umbrella, king fan, the royal fan, a banner, etc., it indicates a change of a sovereign. So if you get some royal symbol, if the sun is hidden by sparks of fire, smoke, etc., it forebodes destruction. this is interesting. If there should be one single object in the sun's disk, it denotes the advent of famine. If there should be two or more, it denotes destruction, and these should be objects referred to above. And should the objects referred to above be the colors white, red, yellow, and black, the destruction of the following classes in order. The classes of people are white, not the physical color of the skin, but the color associated with this life, like the symbolic color. White is the Brahmana, red is the Kshatriya, the governor, the warrior. White is the thinker, or the priest, or the philosopher. Red is the governor. Yellow is the farmer, and black is the worker. So you can also say it's going to affect that sector of society if the color of the thing is the color associated with that sector. So actually, this is weird stuff. We've never heard of this before. KRS Astrology doesn't talk about it on his YouTube channel. You don't hear it from Dr. Arjun Pai. You don't see it from any Bhava, Ava, or any group today. You don't hear about any of this stuff. But it's actually pretty simple. The way that his whole system boils down is, if there's weird stuff where it's not usually there in front of the sun, you better pay attention to it. It means something. If there's stuff hiding the sun, it's not good news. Look at the shape of the thing, look at the color of the thing, and that will tell you what to interpret. The thing will affect what the shape looks like. So if it looks like a plow, then it affects the farms. If it looks like a scepter, then it affects the king. And then if it has a certain color to it, then it will affect that sector of society that's signified by that color. Make sense? Lakshmi. And these portents appearing on the sun's disk bring danger from these directions to the people that behold them. People will get troubles from that very quarter which these portents make their appearance in the sun's disk. So it's another simple thing that he's saying. Interpret the spot on the sun, the place on the sun where you see that mark, as being the direction relative to you from which the problem comes. No. That's the end of that discussion. What if it looks like a mother? I don't know what a mother looks like. What do you mean, like like the way they put the female sign on the bathroom, like a lady with a dress, or like somebody with a big belly? But obviously, if for some reason, if you are a qualified astrologer, first of all, and you're looking at an omen of some weird thing in front of the sun, and it looks to you like a mother, then you know what you have to interpret. There's problems to the mother, or mothers in general, right? If it's a red mother, then it's the king's mother, or the mother of leaders, the mother of warriors. The mothers of warriors, they suffer problems. If it's a reddish mother in the northeast in the sun's disk, then some trouble is coming to the mother of the kings from northeast of your country. That's what he's saying. If it's in the shape of a laptop computer, then your computer is going to break. I'm sorry to hear that. So that's the end of this section about the Ketus, the weird stuff in front of the sun. Now he's going to talk about something else, which again is very strange to us. He's not talking about anything about stuff that we're used to hearing when you hear about astrology. But this is also a clue that astrology used to be very different. So the next thing he's going to talk about is the color of the sun. The color of the sun. He says the upward rays. So I think it means the rising sun. If the rays are too red, wow, this is like Lord of the Rings. Maybe Tolkien, maybe this kind of wives' tales or legend type thing was still in vogue when Tolkien was a kid and he knew about it. There's a line in Lord of the Rings where Legolas the elf says something. Like there's a red sun rising there's going to be a problem. So he said, if the sun rises very, very coppery, then the king has a problem. You know why? You should know why. Because he just said that the red is associated to the warriors and the leaders, and white to the priests. So if the sun is too red, then it's something weird about the rulers. If the sun is too white, then there's something bad about the preachers, the teachers, the priests. If there's something bad, if the sun is too yellow, now I don't know how that would happen since the sun is usually yellow, right? Then you get problems for the farmers. If the color of the rising sun is misty or weird, then you're probably not going to get rain, and you're probably going to get some mishaps like war. Next, he talks about how the sun should look in different seasons. During Shishira Ritu, the color of the sun should be that of copper. Shishira is, I think it's the early winter. So you should expect the sun to get a little bit more reddish in the winter. Maybe he's saying this to prevent you from being overly sensitive to the changes in the color of the sun. We're talking about seriously noticeable color changes in the sun. It's going to naturally vary a little bit from season to season. It's greenish, turns more yellowy green when it's spring, he says. In the hot season, it's almost white. In Varsh is rain season, it looks like the inside of a lotus, which is kind of yellow. In Hemant, which is the deep winter, then it gets very dark. It gets like red. In the rainy season, the sun being glossy or showing the colors of other seasons is also auspicious if it happens in the rainy season. So this is what he's saying. This is good stuff if the sun looks this color in this season. I like it. So far he hasn't talked about a birth chart at all. If during Varsh Ritu, which is rain, the rays of the sun be sharp and white, the destructions of Brahman. Because in the rainy season, the sun should be fuzzy and blurry because it's the rainy season. If during Varsh Ritu, the rays of the sun be sharp, clear, and white like the summer, so basically if it gets like the summer in the rainy season, then it's bad for the Brahmins, for the teachers and thinkers. If it gets very red like the winter during the rainy season, I thought he said it would be good in the rainy season. Maybe it's a bad translation. When the color is blood red, the Kshatriyas are ruined. The color is yellow. It's difficulty to the farmers, etc. Lastly, if it's black, the ruin of the Shudra. But if the rains be soft, in the cases everything. But if the rains be soft in the cases above mentioned, everything will be okay. So he says, even if the rainy season is rainy, then everything is okay, better than okay, if the sun changes its colors and shows colors from different seasons. But if it actually stops raining during the rainy season, then you have problems. And the nature of the problems are based on the color of the sun. Then he's going to talk about the irregular. This is actually pretty darn interesting and useful, because I notice this a lot. Seasonal irregularity, and I always think there must be something to read out of this seasonal irregularity. So he's giving a system for interpreting seasonal irregularities. So see what he's doing. First thing, all he's talking about now is irregularities. In the whole chapter, he opened up the chapter by saying the sun may have irregularities in its speed of its motion, so therefore the actual day at which it does its solstice. The sun may have irregularities in its appearance. There might be weird stuff in front of it. Now he's saying the sun may have irregularities in its color. And now he's further saying the color of the sun or the nature of the sun might be irregular in different seasons. So this is saying there might be seasonal irregularities. So next he talks about the hot season. If it gets blood red, if it gets dark red, if it looks like a winter sun during the summer, then people become very scared. So I think that means panic. People panic. If in spring you get a dark sun, then you get drought. If in winter the sun is yellow like the spring, then you get diseases. If the solar disk, wow, this is an interesting situation. It must have been observed at one point. If the solar disk be cut across by a rainbow, it indicates something untoward to the ruling chief of the country. This is so locational specific, how you see the rainbow in relation to the sun. I can hardly imagine how the disk of the sun would be touched by a rainbow, but I'll keep my eyes out. If you guys ever see it, take a picture of it and send it to me, please. During the rainy season, if the sun has a bright appearance, it indicates immediate rain. If during the spring the sun is the color of the sure flower, which I don't know what it is, there will be immediate downpour of the rain. If the color be of a peacock's plume, there will be no rain for 12 years to come. Wow. No, he's not talking about solar flares, Bardo, right? Oh, are you asking about solar flares? No, he's not talking. He hasn't mentioned anything about solar flares. I ruled that out at the beginning because he said these things can also happen to the moon when he was talking about the Ketus. When the sun is dark in color, there will be danger to crops from insects and reptiles. If the color be ashy, there will be fear from other kings. If the sun should have a slit in his disk, it indicates the destruction of the king who has the star occupied by the sun at the time as his natal asterism. So that's very interesting. If you get the sun having a mark in it, which again looks like the Ketu thing, then you should know what nakshatra is occupied by the sun at that time, and then the king, the ruler of the area who has that hit the sun in that nakshatra, gets a problem. If the sun, while in the upper regions of the sky, be in color similar to the blood of the hare, again there's things that we just don't know about anymore, there will be war in the land. If it should appear cool like the moon without rays, the king will be killed, and another will soon occupy his place. If the sun should appear like a pot, I guess if the shape of the sun doesn't really seem to be round, then you get problems with food. People will suffer hunger. If it appears broken, people will die. If he should be without rays, it indicates fear. If he assumes the form of an arch, the chief city will be ruined. If he appears like an umbrella, it indicates destruction of the whole country. So again, I just wish that Varahamihira picked up a pencil and made a drawing of these things, because I would love to know what the sun actually looks like when he considers it looking like a pot. I mean, does it actually look like a pot from the grocery store, like a cooking pot? Probably not. It's probably like a little squashed down. But I would love to see what he would consider. What does the sun appear blood red? Like, I wish there was like a picture of it so we could see what this guy considered to be a green sun or a black sun. Anyway, at least we have a written record that the astrologers were looking at the sun's shape, color, and shape and color, and comparing it to what it was supposed to be, and making predictions based on that. All right, so maybe we can look for the next topic. Here's the next topic. During sunrise or sunset, when a meteor, lightning, or thunderbolt strikes the sun, it indicates the death of a ruling king. If the sun is encircled by Parivesh every day, or during the two twilights, Parivesh? It's like a halo around the sun, maybe? Or like a corona around the sun. If the sun should be encircled by a corona every day, or during the two twilights, be red in color during the times of setting and rising, it indicates a change in sovereign. I think that's the corona. Like if you're seeing a crown on the sun, then there's going to be a crowning ceremony. You see how simple the system really is. He's basically saying you look at the sun, and what it looks like indicates to you. If during sunrise or sunset the sun be concealed by clouds in the form of weapons. So now he's saying you could look at the shape of the clouds that conceal the sun at the time of sunrise or sunset. So you can't see the sunrise or sunset because there's this shape of a cloud in front of the sun. This is a little bit easier to understand. If the clouds take the form of a deer, a buffalo, a bird, donkey, camel, there will be fear from animals. Another problem with this stuff is there's always going to be problems. Maybe that's the nature of the world. There's always problems. So the astrologer is really just figuring out where the problems come from. But it just seems like they're just listing a million things, and like on every day almost you'd have one of these things happen. When an asterism on account of its conjunction, when an asterism on account of its conjunction with the sun is subjected to a good deal of torture by the sun's rays, it emerges out all the more pure and clean as gold after its purification. Okay, let me try to figure out what he's talking about here. Divakarak. Let me just check the Sanskrit here. I want to just see. I'm a little bit doubtful that he actually said nakshatra anywhere. Let me just check the next one. I doubt that he's saying a nakshatra. I think what he's saying is if you have a planet conjoined to the sun, because this is a principle from ancient astrology that's fairly well preserved, more well preserved than the other stuff we've been hearing about. If a planet gets into conjunction with the sun, it suffers as it becomes combust. But once it emerges from the combustion, it's not suffering. When it's entering into combustion, it's negative for the planet. But when it's emerging from combustion, it's positive for the planet. And he says, just like gold becomes more clean and beautiful after you melt it, similarly, after the planet goes into the sun, it becomes very purified. So it's auspicious. So what he's saying is it's auspicious for a planet to be leaving the sun's conjunction, but it's difficult or inauspicious for the planet to be entering the sun's conjunction. And that's a fairly well-known principle. Then he says, now he talks about where the sun gets blurry and gets a big halo, so it looks like there's two suns almost. If the fake sun looks like is to the north of the real one, then you get rain. If it's to the south, then you get floods. If above, there will be danger to the king. If below, then the people will perish. Okay. Let's hear some good stuff. So knowing declination, I think you north and south, you just need to know your north and south. If it's north from the sun, you're looking at the sun and you see that it's got like a lens blur effect on it, where there's like another bright spot when you look at it, and it almost looks like there's a second sun. If that lens blur is to the south of the sun that you see, then he's saying that you interpret there's going to be a lot of heavy rain that would cause flooding. If it's to the north of where you see the sun, then now remember that north and south of the sun, because the sun, the way it goes in the sky, is angular. North and south of the sun is basically left and right. If it's to the right, then you get, if it's to the north, then there's rain, but if it's to the south, it's too much rain. If it's above the sun, it's danger to the king. If it's below the sun, it's danger to the people. Bardo makes an interesting point here. He said in the comments, astrology and meteorology in one text. Astrology and meteorology were one thing. That's why it's called meteorology. Meteorology is just astrology of the things in the atmosphere. Atmospheric astrology is meteorology, but they were one thing for a very long time, until the advent of computers. Maybe possibly up till that time, where they started changing the way they do meteorology to doing to trying to model the weather patterns with a computer. Okay, I'm getting a little bored of hearing these. And look, he knew I was getting bored, so he ended it too. So the third chapter on the sun ends. That's kind of amazing. It ends by saying, the sun with a spotless form, clear and not crooked, with bright, abundant, clear and long rays, and bearing a natural appearance, color, and features, will prove auspicious to everybody. So I guess it seems a little bit annoying to me that there's a long list of things that are going to cause everybody to die and suffer. But I think this last text puts it in context. The last thing says, look, if the sun is like it's supposed to be every day, and it's just a natural, normal, healthy sun, then that means everything is good. But when there's weird stuff, then it indicates bad things. And here's a long list of different kinds of weird things and some examples of how you can interpret them. That is basically what he did in the sun's chapter. Let's see next time we get together on my Monday, what he says about the moon. Bardo wants to know why the sciences of meteorology and astrology divorce now. Because they just changed the way they did it, and you get better results from modeling the weather patterns rather than trying to interpret a symbol about the weather. You'll get more accurate results if you can model the weather patterns. So just for practical reasons, they changed to trying to predict the weather by modeling it in computer simulations. If we could model karma by computer simulations, we would stop using birth charts, because we would get more accurate results from modeling the karma like that. But we don't know enough about karma's specific mechanisms to be able to model it. But with the weather, you can see heat, pressure, and stuff like that, and you can measure it. You can model it. All right, guys, I'm going to end this one now, and I'm looking forward to switching over the stream to the Bhagavatam stream and looking at the chapter where Sutta Goswami starts speaking. So stick around and look for the other stream about that. I'm going to end this one now. Thank you.